Hi everyone, it's Erin from the Provincial Farmhouse. In today's video, I am going to be creating some French country wall art out of a thrifted tray. I thrifted this tray for about $1 and I knew it would make the perfect base for some wall art. I'm going to be using Paint Couture's 2-in-1 primer in grey, and I'm going to be applying one coat, letting it dry for about an hour, and then applying another coat and letting that dry for another hour as well. This primer is not only going to prepare my surface for paint, but it will block any stains. I'm then going to be using Redesign's new Salon de Glace mold. I'm pouring out some of my quick set resin, equal parts A and B, and then once I have that mixed properly, that takes about 30 to 40 seconds, I'm going to be pouring them into my molds. Now, it does take about 10 to 15 minutes for them to set, but this is definitely something that you want to use as opposed to clay because it will become rigid and be able to hold its form without breaking. If you place clay on something that isn't fully supported by the back, you might find that it crumbles and falls off. So we definitely need to use resin for today's project. As I'm pouring my resin, I'm just going around and making sure that I have that resin in each of the sections of this mold. It took about 60 mils to fill this entire set here, so keep that in mind if you're going to try this. And as you can see, I'm just going around making sure every little section is filled. After about 10 minutes, my pieces are ready to come out. So I'm gently pulling the resin out of my mold and I'm just having a bit of a play with how I'm going to position it. This particular design, however, I am going to be splitting in two. So I'm going to use my craft knife to cut the top section of that mold off. And always keep this in mind, you don't have to use your molds as is. You can either partially cast them in clay if you're going to be working with clay, or like I am, I'm just using my craft knife to cut it. You can also use some sandpaper or just lightly use your knife to reshape it. So this particular design is going to sit at the top of our tray, and obviously I'm going to put the other one down the bottom. I'm using Gorilla Super Glue Gel to attach my castings today, and ultimately, as you've probably guessed, we are trying to create a frame, an ornate frame that is going to go around the outside there. So if you're going to try this, it will be up to you as to how many of these molds you're going to attach. So I have my glue on the back there. I'm just pressing it down on top of my tray until it's secure. This only takes about a minute with this particular glue. I'm then going to repeat the same process, adding glue to each of the different pieces and holding it down until it's secure. As I only just cast these particular resin pieces, they are still flexible. If you are dealing with pieces that you have cast a little while ago, I suggest that you use a heat gun. You can see I have mine sitting there to the left just in case I need to add a little bit more heat to get it to bend and manipulate the way I want. But definitely add that heat before you try to bend your molds because you may risk snapping them. Once my castings were all glued down and the glue had thoroughly dried, I took that 2-in-1 primer by Paint Couture again, and I'm just going to go over the top of my castings. You don't always need to do this, however, I felt that it would be good to just make sure I had that added bit of insurance that the paint was going to stick and stay there. Once my primer was completely dry, I took Paint Couture's Crust Medium, and I'm going to take out one part of that product and put it in a plastic container, and then I'm going to take 2 parts of Paint Couture's Embossing Medium and we are going to mix those together. Once that mixture was thoroughly mixed together, I took Paint Couture's Pine Cone Chalk Paint, that is a brown tone, and I'm just going to add a few drops of that paint to tint our mixture. I'm then going to mix that all together well. Next, I'm going to take a palette knife and I'm going to start applying it to the outside rim of the tray. Ultimately, what I want to create here is texture. I want it to look almost like an old plaster frame, and I'm going to be concentrating that mixture around the outside edge of the tray. Doing this is going to help it look less like a tray and more like an old oval frame. As I'm applying this around the outside, I'm switching between using the palette knife and also a paintbrush, and I am dabbing and stippling that product on at times. I think that in some places it might even look like rust or maybe just chips in an old wooden frame. I'm also making sure to add it in between each of my castings so we have that continuation of the texture so that it all feels like a cohesive piece. If I inspire you to try any of these Paint Couture products, I would really appreciate it if you would use my affiliate link. I will put it in the description and on the screen. I just get a little thank you from Paint Couture in return. Once I'm finished adding the mixture to the outside rim of the frame, I'm also going to go over the top of the castings themselves with what I have left in my container. This is going to again help make it look like it's all cohesive and one design, and it's also going to give some age to those castings and make them look like less like resin and more like perhaps plaster or carvings. I let this dry completely, and then I came in with Paint Couture's Buttercream chalk paint, and I'm going to go in and apply that paint over the entire tray. Now we are going to be adding some decoupage in the center, so it's a good idea to have a light background behind your paper so that the colors remain vibrant and really pop. But I'm also going to be adding it to the outside of the frame as well. However, when I'm adding it to the outside section, I'm going to be a little bit heavier. We are going for texture, we are going for age here, so I'm happy for it to go on a lot thicker, and hopefully we will get a little bit more texture out of applying it in this way. So I'm going to continue adding that paint around the outside, and it is going to take 2 coats as well to get the coverage that I want. After I finished applying each coat of the buttercream, I did come in with my hairdryer and I sped up the drying process after each coat. It was my hope that this would add to that texture and look of age. Next, I'm going to be using an older design by Posh chalk, and this is called Floral Palette. This is a rice paper by Woodgie Bend, and I am just loving the old world feel that this design has. So I'm going to position it where I want it to go, and you can see I'm just sort of plotting that out, using my nails a little bit to work out which part of the design is going to be visible and which part I want to leave out. I definitely wanted some of that darkness down the bottom there and then that contrasting light section. I'm now running my fingernail along the edge of the tray where I want my paper to stop so that I've got a bit of a guide when I come in with my scissors. And then I'm going to come in and cut out my design, but I am leaving about 1 to 2 centimeters around the edge just to be sure that I have enough of that paper in the tray and that I haven't made any errors. Once I'm happy with how it's going to look, I'm going to be taking Paint Couture's Decoupage Medium in Matte, and I'm going to be laying down a generous amount of that product just in the section where we want our decoupage design to go. So you want to make sure you have a generous amount there so that it doesn't dry before you get your paper down. But I'm also being careful not to get it on the outside rim where we've created that frame design. So I only want it in those sections so it makes it a bit easier for me to cut the excess off later. So once I'm happy with the amount of product I have down, I'm going to position the decoupage paper where I want it to go, and then I'm going to start pressing it down. You'll see I do reposition it a couple of times, and that's okay as long as you do that before the decoupage paper has time to soak in too much of that product, because it does become a little bit brittle when you do this. And now you can see I'm using my brush to really start smoothing that paper down. I'm also ripping it in certain sections, just adding a few little rips here and there where we have to manipulate it around those castings. And again, just using my brush to smooth it all out. I only have a little bit of product on my brush at this point. Once I'm happy with how it's laying, I'm going to come in with another coat of that decoupage medium to seal everything down. Once my piece was completely dry, I took a craft knife and I'm just going to go around the edge, and I'm going to make some little cuts along the edge there of the frame so that we can cut off the excess. Now, I was very careful not to get any product on the outside section of the frame, but I'm using a knife here to be sure that I don't accidentally rip off more than I want. Ordinarily, when I'm trying to trim off excess decoupage paper, I would use some sandpaper, but because of the shape of our project today, it's just better if I come in with a craft knife to remove the excess. Once I have all of the excess paper removed, I did come in with a bit more of that decoupage medium to seal down the edges. When that was dry, I came in with Paint Couture's Amber Honey Antiquing Glaze. This is a new one. I have not used this before. I would say it's in between Van Dyke Brown Glaze and Light Brown Sugar Glaze, so it's a nice happy medium. You can see I'm applying it, and then I'm coming in with a wet wipe and dabbing off some of the excess. I am going to allow quite a bit more of this product to sit down in those details because I want the frame to look quite vintage and antique, and this glaze is really going to achieve that. So I'm really working it into the details of our castings there, and I love how when you add a glaze, an antiquing glaze, it really just highlights those details even further. I'm then coming in with a wet wipe and pulling that back. Again, I'm really going to allow a lot of that excess to sit down in those low points. So I'm just going to continue working my way around the frame section there, adding the antiquing glaze and pulling it back, and I'm loving how it's catching the texture that we created, adding that crust and embossing medium mix. It just really is giving this quite an antiqued look. If this was a bit too grungy for you, however, you could obviously leave this step out. Once my glaze was completely dry, I took Paint Couture's Bronze Luxe Metallic, and I've just got a little bit on my paintbrush, and I'm going to go around and add it to some of the details on our castings. I do not want it to be perfect. I want this to look like faded and worn away gilding, so I'm just going around and hitting a few of the places with that beautiful metallic. And remember, if you are using the Luxe Metallics by Paint Couture, they do become more vibrant as they dry. If bronze isn't for you, Paint Couture have a huge range of metallics. At this point, you could come in with a copper or a silver, or perhaps if you are leaving it a little bit more neutral, you could maybe come in with oyster pearl. That is definitely a beautiful, subtle shine. I'm envisioning that this piece will probably sit on a shelf or a sideboard to be displayed. However, I wanted the option for someone to be able to hang it if they wanted. So I did flip it over. You will notice I haven't painted it yet, but that is because of this step. I'm going to take this eye hook, and then I'm going to be using E6000. I'm going to scuff up the surface first, which is why we didn't bother painting, because we really need that direct contact between the glue and the object you're gluing it to. I'm going to put down a sort of generous little dab of that glue where I want my hanging attachment to go, and then I'm going to press it down in the product. I did then let it set for 24 hours, and then I came in and tidied up the back with some paint. And here's our finished French country art. I love how this turned out. It's hard to believe that that was once just a plain silver tray. Let me know what you think of this in the comments. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button, comment, and share it out. If you haven't already, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of our videos. You can find most of the products used today on our website, theprovincialfarmhouse.com.au. Thanks for watching.